They said girls like me didn't belong at Riverside Academy today. Brittany Sinclair made sure everyone knew it. Aaliyah Monroe's hands trembled slightly as she gathered the scattered papers from the cold marble floor of the Riverside Academy cafeteria. The sharp sting of spilled marinara sauce still lingered on her fingers and stained her uniform. Around her, the whispers and sneers of privileged students echoed beneath the soaring vaulted ceilings, a dissonant soundtrack to her humiliation. Brittany Sinclair's cruel laughter rang out like a bell, clear and unforgiving, commanding the attention of every student in the grand hall. Aaliyah's gaze swept across the sea of expensive designer shoes and immaculately pressed uniforms that formed a cold barrier, trapping her in a cage of wealth and disdain. She remembered, with bitter clarity, the harsh lesson her sensei had instilled in her. True power lay not in retaliation, but in the quiet strength of choosing one's moment. The remnants of the food fight that Brittany had orchestrated lay scattered across the polished tiles pasta noodles, glistening drops of tomato sauce, and the sharp, clattering sound of a fallen tray. As Aaliyah bent to retrieve her ruined notes, the laughter from Brittany's entourage morphed into jeers and insults. "I didn't know Riverside let girls from the West End in now," Brittany spat, her words dripping with venom. "Maybe they just needed a token to boost their diversity numbers." The words struck like ice against Aaliyah's skin, but she forced herself to stand tall, letting the weight of her backpack and the unmistakable outline of her third-degree black belt press against her back like a shield. The cell phones had emerged, raised in unison, capturing every humiliating moment. The digital eyes of the Riverside student body were now witnesses, and Aaliyah knew that this public display would ripple through the social fabric of the academy, threatening the delicate balance she fought so hard to maintain. She heard the distant echo of "Ain't No Mountain High Enough" playing faintly through the cafeteria speakers, an ironic anthem underscoring the chasm between her world and theirs. Leaving the cafeteria with her head held high, Aaliyah navigated the sprawling campus with practiced grace, each step measured and deliberate. Her mind counted down the days 312 to the scholarship review that would decide if she could stay at Riverside, the only path she saw to a future beyond the faded walls of her neighborhood. The streets outside were lined with rustling oaks, their leaves casting long shadows in the early afternoon light as she boarded the bus home. Her modest apartment in the West End was a stark contrast to the manicured lawns and wrought iron gates of Riverside Academy. The smell of lemon cleaner mingled with herbal tea, signaling her grandmother Evelyn's presence as Aaliyah slipped inside, careful to conceal the day's bruises. Evelyn Monroe looked up from the kitchen table, her face lined with fatigue and the quiet dignity of years spent caring for others. "You're home, baby," she said softly, the weight of her nurse's double shifts etched in the weariness of her eyes. "How was school today?" "Fine," Aaliyah answered, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The ruined notes and the sting of Brittany's words stayed locked inside her, unspoken. She rolled out the worn mat her father had given her years ago, the fabric soft and familiar beneath her bare feet. The rhythms of her breathing and the flow of her forms became a refuge, a ritual that transformed the day's pain into disciplined power. Memories of her father's gentle voice echoed in her mind, urging her to channel it, Jazz, turning adversity into strength. Each strike, each kick, each perfect stance was a testament not just to skill, but to resilience. That evening, the quiet of the apartment was broken only by the occasional cough from Evelyn, whose exhaustion masked a stubborn determination to provide for Aaliyah's future. The scholarship letter glowed on Aaliyah's phone, a reminder that the National Taekwondo Championship registration deadline loomed just 2 weeks away, with a registration fee well beyond their means. The tension between hope and harsh reality coiled tightly in her chest. In the sterile hallways of Riverside Academy the following week, the social battlefield hardened. Aaliyah approached the chemistry study group only to be met with cold refusals. Trevor Wells, Brittany's boyfriend and lacrosse captain, stood guard like a sentinel, his smirk confirming the invisible barriers. "Sorry, we're full," he said dismissively, while Brittany's voice cut through the murmurs. "The showcase is for talent, not charity cases." The sting of exclusion was sharpened by whispered jokes and the casual cruelty of a system designed to keep her out. In chemistry lab, sabotage awaited. As Aaliyah carefully measured chemicals, Brittany's elbow struck, spilling the solution across her meticulously kept notes. Mr. Phillips barked orders, unfairly blaming Aaliyah and dismissing her protests. The acrid smell of chemicals filled the air as she was handed a 0. The message clear. Rules were not the same for everyone. Back at home, Evelyn's health faltered. Pneumonia confined her to bed, adding the weight of unpaid medical bills to the mounting pressure. Aaliyah's nights stretched long, balancing caretaking, schoolwork, and grueling taekwondo practice under Master Lee's watchful eye. His reminders of harmony and perseverance became lifelines, and Coach Daniel's quiet encouragement began to light a path through the darkness. When social media erupted with a fake profile mocking her, the isolation cut deep. But so did the fire ignited by injustice. Alone in the empty gym, Aaliyah channeled her rage into every precise movement, her body a vessel of pain transformed into power. Finally, she made a choice. Submitting an anonymous entry to the Riverside Charity Gala under the name J. Monroe, she set the stage for a confrontation not just with Brittany Sinclair, but with the very culture that sought to silence her. The night before the gala, the shadow of financial strain darkened their kitchen, but Evelyn's steady hand squeezed Aaliyah's with quiet faith. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next day, beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Performing Arts Center, Aaliyah prepared to step into the light. Brittany's laughter, brittle and forced, echoed from backstage, but Aaliyah's resolve was unshakable. She was ready not just to perform, but to reclaim her dignity. The stage was set for a night that would change everything. At Riverside Academy, the rules weren't the same for everyone, especially not for Aaliyah Monroe. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the library, casting long shadows over polished wood tables and neatly stacked textbooks. Aaliyah sat quietly in a corner, her chemistry textbook open, but her mind elsewhere, weighed down by the invisible burdens that came with being the scholarship student in a sea of privilege. The whispered judgments that trailed her like a shadow reminded her how tenuous her place really was. Her fingers traced the edge of her notes as she reread the email notification she had received just days ago. The National Taekwondo Championship registration deadline was fast approaching. 2 weeks remained, and with the $2,000 registration fee glaring like an impossible mountain, hope felt fragile. In the silence of the library, the door swung open, and Brittany Sinclair sauntered in with her usual entourage. Her confident laughter rippled through the quiet, drawing eyes like moths to a flame. Trevor Wells, lacrosse captain and Brittany's ever-loyal companion, blocked the table where Aaliyah hoped to join a study group. "Sorry, we're full," he said, voice dripping with smug certainty. The words carried more than just exclusion. They were a barrier, a declaration that Aaliyah did not belong. Aaliyah's heart thumped painfully, but she kept her face calm, though the burning in her chest threatened to betray her. Brittany cut in without missing a beat, her voice sharp and dismissive. "The charity showcase is next month. My parents are sponsoring it. The winner gets $2,500. Not that you'd have anything worth showcasing." Her words sliced through the air, the cruel insinuation hanging heavy. Aaliyah's mind raced. That prize could cover her championship fee and travel expenses. The thought ignited a flicker of determination amid the growing storm. Later, in the chemistry lab, tension simmered beneath the fluorescent lights. Aaliyah carefully measured the chemicals, her focus absolute despite the gnawing fatigue and stress. But then Brittany's elbow collided with the table, spilling a solution over Aaliyah's meticulous notes. The sharp, acrid scent filled the air as the liquid seeped through pages she had spent hours perfecting. "Miss Monroe," Mr. Phillips barked from across the room. "Control your materials. That's a 0 for today's lab." Aaliyah opened her mouth to explain, but his steely gaze silenced her. "Some students," he added pointedly, "should be grateful for the opportunities they've been given." The message was unmistakable. The rules were different for her. The sting of unfairness blended with the sour smell of chemicals as Aaliyah clenched her fists, forcing herself not to break. At home, the atmosphere was heavy. Evelyn Monroe's pale face betrayed her struggle against pneumonia, and the stack of unpaid bills grew larger. "You need rest," Aaliyah urged gently, helping her grandmother settle into bed. Evelyn's eyes, tired but resolute, met hers. "I'll manage. You focus on school. Your future depends on it." The weight of responsibility pressed down harder, but Aaliyah nodded, swallowing her fears. Master Lee's voice echoed in her mind during late-night practice sessions at the community center's dojang. "Taekwondo is harmony, not revenge," he said, watching her movements with keen eyes. Sweat dampened her uniform as she flowed through forms, each strike a release of frustration and a reclaiming of power. Coach Daniels had begun to notice, offering quiet encouragement during gym class. "You move differently," she had said once, her gaze steady and unjudging. "Ever think about the showcase? That kind of skill gets noticed." The idea had taken root in Aaliyah's heart, fragile but growing. Yet social media was another battlefield. A fake profile appeared, mocking her with crude stereotypes, flooding the digital halls with hateful comments. Reporting it felt futile, the damage was already done. The isolation was crushing, but tears this time were not of sorrow. They were incandescent, burning with the fury of injustice. In the quiet of her room, Aaliyah made a decision. She would enter the showcase. She would make them see her. One night, her finger hovered over the Submit button on the online entry form, her heart pounding in her ears. "J. Monroe," she typed, the anonymity a small shield against the storm. Confirmation flashed, slot number 14. There was no turning back. The following day, whispers about the mysterious J. Monroe spread through the halls. Brittany's dismissive laughter barely concealed her unease. At the same time, Evelyn's cough worsened, and the strain on their small apartment grew heavier. But amid the chaos, Aaliyah's resolve only deepened. The coming weeks became a crucible. Early mornings filled with grueling practice before school. Exhausted evenings spent caring for Evelyn and poring over textbooks. Moments stolen in empty classrooms to refine every move. Coach Daniels' visits brought brief respite and steady support. Her presence a quiet reminder that Aaliyah was not alone. Through it all, Brittany's veneer cracked. Overheard conversations revealed her fear of failure, her reliance on privilege, and a secret desperation to keep control. Aaliyah listened from the shadows, heart steady but mind racing with cautious hope. The night before the Riverside Charity Gala, Aaliyah returned home to find unpaid medical bills stacked on the kitchen table. The sum $1,800 loomed large, threatening to topple their fragile balance. Evelyn's reassuring smile belied the worry etched into her features. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." And so, beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Performing Arts Center, with Brittany's jeers ringing faintly behind her, Aaliyah prepared to step into the light. Tonight, she would no longer be invisible. Tonight, she would reclaim her story. The Riverside Charity Gala was filled with glittering privilege, but tonight, the spotlight belonged to Aaliyah Monroe. The grand auditorium at Riverside Academy was awash with warm light, the blue and gold banners hanging like silent sentinels above rows of plush velvet seats. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, mingling with polished wood and the faint undertone of anticipation. Parents in tailored suits and glittering gowns murmured among themselves, glasses of champagne delicately balanced in hand. It was an event steeped in tradition, a celebration of legacy families and their carefully curated talents. Yet beneath the surface, the undercurrent of competition and expectation pulsed with an intensity that few outsiders could grasp. Backstage, the atmosphere was charged with nervous energy. Aaliyah stood apart from the swirling chaos of performers, her white dobok crisp and immaculate despite the long journey here. The fabric felt like armor, a shield woven from years of discipline and quiet resolve. She adjusted the gold chain around her wrist, the only tangible link to her father, and closed her eyes briefly, drawing strength from memories of his steady voice and unwavering belief in her. But Brittany Sinclair moved with practiced grace, her expensive dance costume shimmering under the stage lights. But beneath the polished exterior, Aaliyah could see the telltale signs of anxiety, the slight tremor in Brittany's hands, the tight line of her jaw as she rehearsed the routine she had copied from a viral video. Brittany's parents sat in the front row, their smiles fixed and expectant, ready to applaud their daughter's anticipated victory. The pressure weighed heavily on Brittany, a fragile mask concealing deeper fears. The gala began with performances that embodied the Academy's prestige, violin solos that danced with precision, ballet routines that glided effortlessly across the stage, and arias that soared with practiced perfection. Each act was met with polite applause, a ritual of appreciation for years of privileged training. The audience's attention was focused but somewhat detached, accustomed to excellence but rarely moved by it. When Brittany took the stage, the crowd erupted into enthusiastic applause. Her contemporary dance was flawless in execution, every step polished and rehearsed under the guidance of a professional choreographer. Yet, as Aaliyah watched from the wings, she noticed the lack of genuine passion. The routine was mechanical, a shadow of artistry devoid of heart. Brittany's face remained fixed in concentration, her movements precise but lacking the fire that comes from authentic expression. Then it was Aaliyah's turn. Stepping onto the stage, barefoot and alone, she felt the heat of spotlights searing her skin and the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. A hush fell over the audience, curiosity mingling with skepticism. What was this strange new act, a martial arts demonstration in a room filled with dancers and musicians? But as the haunting fusion of traditional Korean drums and deep, contemporary bass began to vibrate through the floorboards, something shifted. Aaliyah moved with the fluid grace of water, each stance and strike telling a story of struggle and resilience. Her clumsy forms were crisp, precise, and commanding, capturing the audience's attention and quieting the murmurs. The rhythm of her movements was poetry in motion, a silent narrative of a journey marked by pain, perseverance, and pride. As she transitioned into breaking techniques, assistants from Master Lee's dojang appeared to hold boards aloft. The sharp crack of splintering wood punctuated the performance, eliciting gasps from the crowd. Her aerial kicks and spins defied gravity, her body a blur of power and control. The gold chain around her wrist caught the light with each motion, a shimmering symbol of heritage and hope. In the front row, Brittany's parents exchanged worried glances, their earlier confidence replaced by unease. Brittany herself stood frozen backstage, The arrogance drained from her expression as she watched Aaliyah captivate the room with undeniable strength and authenticity. For the finale, Aaliyah called forward 3 senior boys from the basketball team, their tall frames forming a human barrier. With a deep breath, she sprinted and launched a breathtaking flying kick, soaring over them with perfect control and landing silently on the other side. The audience erupted into stunned silence, followed by a spontaneous standing ovation that grew louder with each passing second. Aaliyah bowed deeply, her heart pounding but her breathing steady. She lifted her father's chain high above her head, the gesture a tribute to the journey that had brought her here and the battles yet to come. Backstage, Brittany's composure shattered. She confronted Aaliyah with accusations and venom, her voice trembling with rage. Unbeknownst to them, a partially open door revealed 3 students recording the altercation. Their phones captured Brittany's threats and Aaliyah's calm, measured response, a stark contrast that quickly went viral across the school's social media channels. The applause still echoed as Aaliyah left the stage, trophy in hand and prize check tucked safely in her bag. The energy in the room had shifted irreversibly. A new narrative had been written tonight, and the story was far from over. The recording went viral within minutes. What Brittany thought was a private outburst became public reckoning. The hallways of Riverside Academy buzzed with a new energy the morning after the gala. Students whispered eagerly in clusters, phones in hand, their screens glowing with the video that had swept through the school like wildfire. Brittany Sinclair's harsh words and trembling fury, caught on camera, were starkly contrasted by Aaliyah Monroe's composed, unyielding demeanor. The footage was undeniable, a powerful indictment not only of Brittany's entitlement, but of the toxic culture she represented. Aaliyah walked the corridors with a quiet confidence that surprised even her. The usual cold shoulders and avoidance began to thaw as more students approached, their expressions softened by admiration or curiosity. Among them was Jason Wells, the lacrosse team captain, whose usual aloofness gave way to tentative respect. "That was incredible, Aaliyah," he said quietly as they crossed paths near the locker bays. "I'm thinking, maybe we should start a martial arts club. I'd like to learn a few moves." His offer, tentative but sincere, marked a subtle shift, a bridging of social divides that once seemed insurmountable. Behind the scenes, the administration scrambled to respond. Headmaster Grayson convened a meeting with Ms. Harper and other key staff, the viral video impossible to ignore. "Miss Monroe's academic record is exemplary," he noted, eyes serious behind his glasses. "Top grades across the board. This video raises troubling questions about the treatment she's endured. We cannot allow such behavior to undermine the principles Riverside stands for." His voice carried the weight of long-held tradition, now confronted with uncomfortable truths. Ms. Harper shifted uneasily in her seat. The counselor's role was often one of quiet enforcement, balancing institutional loyalty with the growing calls for justice. "We must review our harassment policies and their enforcement," she said cautiously, aware that this was more than a routine procedure, it was a reckoning. Aaliyah was summoned to the headmaster's office for her scholarship review. As she waited, her mind traced the path that had led here from whispered slights and sabotaged notes to this moment of undeniable affirmation. The door opened, and Headmaster Grayson gestured her in. Across the room, Ms. Harper's gaze was measured, but Aaliyah met it steadily, channeling the same focus that had guided her through every challenge. The conversation was formal, but fair. The headmaster acknowledged her academic excellence and lauded her extraordinary performance. The video was a pivotal piece of evidence that reframed the narrative. "Your scholarship will be continued," he declared, "and the board is commissioning a comprehensive review of our harassment policies. Ms. Harper will lead the initiative." The words hung in the air, a promise of change seeded by courage and resilience. Outside the office, Aaliyah found herself surrounded by students, some who had never spoken to her before, now offering congratulations and questions. Trevor Wells, Brittany's former ally, approached with a genuine smile. "That was some performance. I'm interested in learning too." The social landscape was shifting, small ripples growing into waves of transformation. Weeks passed. Brittany returned to school, her demeanor subdued, avoiding Aaliyah's path. Her family's influence shielded her from official consequences, but the power she wielded over the social order had diminished. The video had exposed not just her actions, but the systemic protections that had allowed such behavior to flourish unchecked. One afternoon, Brittany approached Aaliyah alone in the library. Her voice was stiff, tinged with reluctance. "My parents are making me apologize," she said, eyes cast downward. "They're worried about their reputation." Aaliyah studied the girl who had tormented her, seeing for the first time the weight of impossible expectations and the fragility beneath the facade of privilege. "Is that all you're worried about?" Aaliyah asked quietly. Brittany hesitated, then admitted, "They've never seen me fail before. Now it's all they see." In that moment, empathy flickered through Aaliyah's heart. She understood the suffocating pressure, the fear of losing what seemed so unattainable. "Maybe it's not about failing or succeeding," Aaliyah suggested softly. "Maybe it's about being real." Brittany said nothing, but as she walked away, the stiffness in her shoulders seemed to ease. Just a little. Outside, autumn leaves tumbled through the crisp air, swirling gold and crimson against the fading light. Aaliyah stood quietly, reflecting on how far she had come, not just in skill, but in reclaiming her place, her dignity, and her voice. The world was beginning to listen. In the crisp autumn air, Aaliyah Monroe stood not just as a champion, but as a mentor to those who would follow. The dojang was filled with the steady rhythm of disciplined footsteps and the soft sounds of focused breathing. Outside, the trees of the West End neighborhood were shedding their leaves, the gold and crimson swirling against the fading light, a quiet reminder of change and renewal. Inside, Aaliyah moved with calm authority, guiding a group of children through basic taekwondo forms. Her voice was patient yet firm, carrying the lessons of years spent navigating struggle and triumph. Each child's determined face reflected hope, a promise of strength yet to be fully realized. Her gaze settled on a shy 7-year-old girl struggling to find her balance. Aaliyah knelt beside her, gently correcting a stance with careful hands. "Remember," she said softly, "Taekwondo isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing your own strength, even when no one else sees it yet." The girl's eyes brightened, and Aaliyah felt the weight of her own journey echoing through this simple act of teaching. Back in the small apartment where Evelyn Monroe rested, the atmosphere was quieter now, softened by healing and the gentle hum of evening routines. The stack of bills still loomed, but the pressure had eased. The scholarship prize money had been carefully allocated, not just for the upcoming championship registration, but to provide some breathing room for the family. Evelyn's health had improved steadily, her smiles a balm to Aaliyah's tireless spirit. At Riverside Academy, change was palpable. The martial arts club that Aaliyah had helped found was growing rapidly, drawing students from across social circles. Coach Daniels stood proudly at the edge of the gym, watching as novices learned punches and kicks, their confidence blossoming under Aaliyah's patient guidance. The school had implemented new anti-harassment policies, with consequences that were beginning to reshape behaviors. The culture, while far from perfect, was shifting. Walls were starting to crumble. Aaliyah's phone buzzed with an email invitation to speak at a regional education conference. The request was a testament to her emerging role as a voice not only within Riverside, but in broader conversations about justice and resilience. She read the message twice, the words sinking in with the gravity of new responsibility. The evening before the conference, she sat on the worn couch in the living room, her father's gold chain resting in her palm. Memories of his quiet strength filled her mind, the first lessons in the community center, the unwavering belief that had carried her through the darkest times. She traced the chain's delicate links, a tangible connection to a legacy that transcended hardship. Outside, the autumn wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. Aaliyah knew the road ahead would not be easy. That systemic change was a marathon, not a sprint. But as she looked around at the children practicing behind her, at the faces filled with determination and hope, she understood that every step forward mattered. Her journey was no longer just about her. It was about those who would follow the ones who would carry the torch, breaking down barriers with quiet courage and unyielding strength. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft sounds of a future being forged, Aaliyah Monroe felt the circle complete itself. Aaliyah Monroe stood quietly in the warm glow of the dojang, the steady rhythm of footsteps and soft breaths filling the space as young students practiced their forms beneath gentle lights. Outside, autumn winds rustled through the trees of the West End neighborhood, scattering golden and crimson leaves, a quiet herald of change and renewal. Inside the training hall, Aaliyah guided a group of children with patience and firm encouragement, her voice steady and kind. Each correction she offered was infused with the wisdom of her own journey, each word a seed planted for the strength yet to bloom in these young faces. Her eyes rested on a shy 7-year-old struggling to maintain balance. Kneeling beside her, Aaliyah gently adjusted the child's stance. "Remember," she said softly, "Taekwondo isn't just about fighting. It's about understanding your own strength, even when others can't see it yet." The girl's eyes lit up, a spark of confidence igniting within her, reflecting the path Aaliyah had walked, a path from silence to power. Back in the small apartment where Evelyn Monroe rested, the atmosphere was calmer, filled with quiet healing and the soothing hum of evening routines. The mountain of unpaid bills still sat on the kitchen table, but the weight on their shoulders had lessened. Evelyn's health had steadily improved, her rare smiles a balm for Aaliyah's tireless spirit. At Riverside Academy, transformation was in the air. The martial arts club Aaliyah helped establish grew rapidly, drawing students from every social circle. Coach Daniels watched proudly from the sidelines as novices learned punches and kicks, their confidence blossoming under Aaliyah's gentle but firm guidance. New anti-harassment policies were now in place, with real consequences that began to shift long-standing behaviors. Though the journey toward inclusivity was far from complete, walls that once divided were slowly crumbling. Aaliyah's phone chimed with an invitation to speak at a regional education conference. The message carried the weight of new responsibility, a recognition that her voice could now reach far beyond the walls of Riverside. That evening, she sat on the worn couch in her living room, her father's gold chain resting in her palm. Memories flooded back the quiet strength of his teachings, the early lessons in the community center, his belief that had carried her through every hardship. Tracing the delicate links, she felt the weight of legacy and hope intertwined. Outside, the autumn breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of renewal. Aaliyah knew the road ahead would be challenging. Systemic change was not won overnight. But looking at the determined faces of her students, she understood that every step mattered. Her journey was no longer hers alone. It belonged to those who would follow, to the next generation who would rise, unafraid and unbowed, armed with quiet courage and unwavering strength. In that serene moment, surrounded by the soft sounds of new beginnings, Aaliyah Monroe felt the circle of her life and purpose close with grace and profound fulfillment. From the very first moment, Aaliyah Monroe's journey was marked by injustice so blatant it could hardly be ignored. She entered Riverside Academy carrying the hopes of her family and the legacy of a father whose voice still echoed in her heart. Yet the world she stepped into was cold and unwelcoming, a place where privilege cast long shadows and prejudice lurked behind polished facades. Brittany Sinclair's cruel laughter in the cafeteria was more than an act of bullying. It was a vivid symbol of a system designed to keep people like Aaliyah invisible, diminished, and powerless. The sharp sting of spilled food, the tearing of notes, the snapping of cameras, all these moments etched into the minds of those who witnessed them, an image of exclusion and cruelty. But what defined Aaliyah was not the humiliation she endured, but the quiet strength with which she bore it. Her sensei's lessons on restraint, her father's words about transforming pain into power, and her grandmother's steadfast love formed the foundation upon which she built her resilience. Each step she took through the pristine halls of Riverside and the cramped rooms of her modest apartment was a testament to a dignity unbowed by contempt. Her black belt, pressed against her back, was not just a symbol of martial skill, but a shield forged in years of discipline and silent courage. The story of Aaliyah and Brittany was never just a personal rivalry. It was the embodiment of a broader struggle between dignity and prejudice, between the quiet determination of the marginalized and the entrenched entitlement of legacy. The systemic bias that favored some and dismissed others played out not only in whispered exclusions, but in the very policies that allowed unequal treatment to flourish. The chemistry lab where Aaliyah's notes were ruined and her voice silenced. The dismissive warnings from teachers who saw her not as a scholar, but as a charity case, all revealed how institutional structures often cloak prejudice beneath a veneer of fairness. Yet the heart of this story lies in the moments of confrontation, when quiet resilience met unyielding bias and the scales began to tip. Aaliyah's decision to enter the Riverside Charity Gala was an act of defiance and self-assertion, a refusal to remain invisible. Her performance, blending the ancient art of Taekwondo with her own narrative of struggle and hope, pierced through the crowd's skepticism and prejudices. It was more than a display of skill. It was a revelation. When the audience rose in unison to applaud, it was not only Aaliyah who was celebrated, but the truth she embodied, the truth that dignity cannot be silenced by cruelty. The viral video of Brittany's backstage threats juxtaposed with Aaliyah's calm strength shattered illusions. It exposed not just one girl's failings, but a culture that had shielded entitlement and tolerated exclusion. The administration's eventual acknowledgement of the systemic failures, their decision to uphold Aaliyah's scholarship and commit to reform, marked a hard-won victory. It was a reminder that policies, no matter how well-intentioned on paper, are hollow without genuine human respect and accountability. This story also highlights the transformative power of allyship. Coach Daniel's quiet encouragement, Jason Wells's unexpected friendship, and even the conflicted Ms. Harper's role in pushing for change demonstrate that courage is not always loud or public. Sometimes it is the steady, principled choice to speak truth to power, to stand beside those who are marginalized. That makes all the difference. Allies become the threads that strengthen the fabric of justice, weaving together individual acts of courage into a tapestry of lasting change. Aaliyah's journey did not end with a trophy or a scholarship renewed. It blossomed into leadership, mentorship, and the fostering of new opportunities for those who, like her, needed a chance to be seen and heard. The martial arts club she helped build, the scholarships she established, and the lives she touched reflect the enduring impact of resilience combined with action. Her story reminds us that systemic prejudice is not immutable. It can be challenged and transformed by those who refuse to accept silence as submission. As autumn leaves danced in the wind outside the dojang, they carried with them the promise of renewal and progress. Aaliyah Monroe's journey is a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who face prejudice, not with bitterness, but with dignity and resolve. It is a call to recognize the difference between superficial policy changes and the profound human respect that must underpin them. It underscores the immense courage required to confront not just an individual wrong, but an entire biased system, and the power of quiet strength in rewriting the narrative. The philosophy remains: dignity is not given. It is claimed. It is upheld not by force alone, but by the persistent courage to stand, to speak, and to show the world who you truly are again and again, until justice can no longer look away. If you found yourself moved by Aaliyah's story, if her victory touched something deep within you, then show your support. Leave a comment with the number 1. Subscribe to our channel to hear the next story of resilience, justice, and transformation. Join us as we continue to shine a light on real stories that challenge power and amplify truth.